Hey everyone, how's it going? Before we delve into today's video, I am aware that in recent videos there have been audio issues causing the video to be basically unlistenable, and I do apologize for that. It's very difficult for me to fix such issues because during the process of recording, I don't get the feedback that the audio is not recording properly. So I only realize that after the fact, and I don't really replay through my videos before uploading them. So you all are typically the first ones who tell me about it, and by then there's not much I can do to fix it. So yeah, if it's any consolation, I'm more annoyed about it than all of you are. So yeah, there's that. Hopefully this video and subsequent ones will be okay. We'll find out. Well, today we'll be playing some SPIKY Jinteki. This is not by any means anything new. We've done SPIKY Jinteki a lot. Well, but for those of you who are newer to this concept, other non-Jinteki decks typically tax the runner in some way, shape or form, and this tax is usually levied in the form of money, economic tax, right? You play taxing ice that costs a lot of money to break, and for the case of Wayland and NBN, you probably play hard-hitting news as well. If you win the trace, the runner will have to spend 4 clicks and 8 credits removing 4 tags, which is a huge tempo hit. Otherwise, they'll be tag me. So that is usually what most decks do. Jinteki is unique in the sense that it can tax via another vector, net damage. So not only does the runner feel the pinch on their credits, they also get pinged from their cards. They start losing cards from their hand. So that's the really cool thing about SPIKY Jinteki. It's not all in on credit taxation or card taxation, but it's a mixture of both, and finding a good balance is key to victory. Now, there is a difference between taxation and winning the tempo game. Even though they share similar concepts, the key difference is that in a tempo deck, speed is essential. There's no point in building a super stack server with 3 DNA trackers and 3 Kakugos if the runner can just sit back, set up their entire rig complete with a feedback filter, and just handle whatever you jam into that remote. Given an infinite amount of time, a runner can probably win against a deck with a lot of taxation, simply because the runner will have time to amass the resources needed to penetrate through servers. Whereas against a tempo deck, the runner does not have the luxury of infinite time. They have to get as much resources as possible before the corp pressures them by scoring 7 agenda points, and use those resources wisely. Every wrong run made are resources spent that could have been spent contesting their agendas instead. So this is an important difference to note, and this is why when you're building and playing your corp deck, you must keep this in mind as well. Time is money. Alright, and how do we go about establishing the tempo difference? We want to win the tempo war, which means that we must gain resources at a faster rate than the runner. A good way to do this is by leveraging on assets. While economy operations give us a one-time benefit, assets persist through the game, giving us clickless benefits as we progress through the game, and that's pretty important. So cards like Marilyn Campaign and Jeeves Model Borrowites help us with that, giving us benefits every single turn the runner decides not to trash them. And even if the runner decides to trash them, this is the best part. They are so expensive to trash that the corp is coming out ahead anyway. So this is a lose-lose decision fork for the runner, because either way, they're either conceding tempo to the corporation or they're losing tempo themselves. Some of you might be wondering, why are you showing this bunch of HB cards? Aren't we playing SPIKY Jinteki here? Well, who says we don't have influence to import these cards? But yeah, that does bring up a very good question. Why not just play HB instead? If HB cards are that efficient and that good, why aren't we playing tempo HB instead? Well, this is a very interesting thing about Jinteki, because I feel that of the 4 factions, Jinteki best allows you to play a deck full of good cards, whereas the other factions have some glaring weakness. Wayland, in particular, struggles with good ice. If they are not allowed to play the advanceable ice, they basically have no good ice in the faction. NBN, on the other hand, have terrible agendas compared to the other 3 factions. Even in the best NBN deck like CTM, half the agendas are blank. The blank Bill, blank Global Food Initiative, they don't do much. Yeah, so it's these these factions, have some glaring weakness that can't really be shored up with influence. Now, HB is an interesting case because they do, just like Jinteki, have good agendas, forward tempo agendas like remote enforcement and hyperloop extension in sports metal. They have good ice. The Fairchild series is awesome. Gatekeeper is wonderful. And they have good money as well. Sports metal, a good money identity, and there's lots of economy cards in faction. So why play Jinteki over HB? Well, I think Jinteki is particularly appealing to most of us less competitive players, simply because Jinteki has so many more tricks up our sleeve. Whereas while HB is a very, straightforward, very predictable faction, Jinteki, on the other hand, allows you to leverage on the secrecy of your deck list, and that keeps the runner guessing. Do they run this card? Are they running that card? What if the deck contains Biovault? I can't safely index because they might pop a Biovault and end the run. What if they have Voter Intimidation? I can't install this very important resource. They might just snipe it from my board. Our Spiky Pilana deck is not going to run either Biovault or Voter Intimidation, but the runner has to respect these cards nonetheless because they're in faction, they're free of charge in terms of influence. So back to Spiky Pilana and the deck list. If you remember my successful demo video on viral weaponization, that was quite some time back. That was a Spiky Pilana deck I built. The deck list is on the left. I've morphed this into the new Spiky Jinteki deck, this time with a completely different identity in Mti Wekundu. Obviously, Mti is a very powerful ID ability, arguably the best in faction, so why not make the switch? So this is the deck. Quite a few changes, but and a lot of cards that are pretty similar between the two. So yeah, something just switching things up a bit. And the best part is because MT is so prevalent right now, I think a lot of people will be expecting either Global Food MT or Surveyor MT, so they'll be very, very surprised when they stumble into all these crazy, wacky net damage based cards. Right? One interesting thing about this deck list is that the ice are really what makes it shine. If you try to build a Jinteki Glacier deck, you'll soon realize that you actually spend a lot of influence on ice, simply because Jinteki's ice are generally very porous. Outside of the barriers, most of the ice don't actually end the run. The best part about our deck is that our ice either ends the run, like Kakugo and Thimble or they deal damage. And if the runner chooses to take the damage face planting these ice, which means they don't have the correct breaker or they're not willing to pay to use their breakers, that means they'll take damage, which in turn means they can't steal Obo Carter protocols. This is a very, very big deal because this means that 9 of your 21 agenda points are unstealable if the runner doesn't have the correct breakers for your net damage ice. This really fortifies your agenda suite and makes your centrals that much more defensive. And that's a very important part of the deck because you won't lose to random single accesses along the way. And this is how your agenda suite comes together very well, because you have both agendas you want to score aggressively in the Nisei Mark II and viral weaponization. These agendas are typically scored early on, so you not only get the benefit from them, but you also remove them from circulation. So the runner can't steal them, meaning that the only agendas available for the runner to steal are your Obo Carters, which are difficult to steal. They have to break your net damage ice one way or another in order to steal the Obo Carters. So that's the lovely synergy that's inherent with the deck. And, well, it's time to bring this Spiky Jinteki to Jinteki and see if we can Jinteki our opponents with Jinteki tricks. Alright, today we are up against Max. This is going to be a high octane matchup. Now, typically in our opening hand, besides not wanting to see too many agendas, we want to see our tempo cards. In descending order of preference, they are Rashida Jahim, Hedge Fund, IPO, Jeeves Motorboroids, and right at the bottom of the totem pole, Maryland Campaign, which makes this opening hand a weak keep. There are no agendas, so we don't have to worry about HQ runs, but we really wish that the Maryland Campaign in our opening hand was a Rashida or something else instead. Well, we can't really complain, so I guess we're keeping this hand. It does have a stopper ice in Fairchild 3 to punish the runner should they attempt to run, but it's not the ideal stopper ice either. Ideal ice include Thimble Rig, cheap to res, ends the run, and Cortex Lock, which doesn't end the run but inflicts a huge amount of damage on the runner. Yeah, Fairchild, the biggest problem with Fairchild 3 is if the runner smartly runs first click, you are at a very, in an awkward position. Either you install the Fairchild 3, res it, and lose all your money, which is not a good idea, given that the runner can simply click through the ice, or you don't install it and your Marilyn gets trashed, which is also very, very bad. Right, what is our opening play here? Pause the video, tell me what you would do on your first turn after mandatory drawing into the Batty. Okay, so first things first. Obviously, we do not play scarcity of resources here. The reason is, since we are up against Max, we are almost certain that their restricted card is Levy AR Lab Access. But that doesn't mean they're not running currents. If anything, we can definitely expect them to be running Hacktivist Meeting, and you'll be sure they are willing to expand a same old thing just to get Hacktivist out to counter your scarcity. Now, this deck absolutely hates Hacktivist. Arguably more so than Employee Strike itself, because Hacktivist disables all defensive upgrades and all our assets. We really cannot afford to be losing cards in hand to Hacktivist reses. So we definitely need the scarcity in hand as a counter current to Hacktivist. The defensive upgrades are useless at this point in the game. Mirage is useless at this point in the game as well. So really we don't have a lot of useful cards remaining. The only thing we can do is to install Marilyn and then take money. Now, some of you might be thinking about installing Marilyn and then installing Fairchild 3 on the Marilyn. I do not like that plan, because why spend a click installing the Fairchild 3 when you can install it for free with Mti's ability anyways? Don't forget we are up against Max that doesn't run Employee Strike most likely. So you don't have to worry about preemptively installing your ice manually, because you're almost certainly going to get your ID ability off this entire game. So my play here would actually be to install Marilyn and take money. Now, I did a very weird maneuver here where I installed the Batty next to the Marilyn in addition, instead of taking a credit. Why did I do this? Well, I felt like it. It is a very vulnerable position for Marcus Batty to be in, but I suspect that my opponent will be hammering my HQ fairly hard, and I don't want them to trash Batty from HQ for 1 credit. Batty actually protects itself better in the remote, because I'm certainly going to install Fairchild 3 on the remote if my opponent attempts to run it. So that was my reasoning behind this play. Either way, whether I click for a credit or install the Batty, I would have enough money to rest the Fairchild 3 anyway at 6 credits. So that was why I went for the play. Again, this is why Fairchild 3 is not an ideal protector for server 1, because if I do decide, sorry about the glitch there, let's take that back a bit. Yeah. Either way, even if I install the Fairchild 3 here on the remote and I res it, I'll go down to 0 credits, which means I can't actually afford to res the Marilyn after that on the next turn. So this is why Fairchild 3 is a really, really bad piece of ice to protect the remote. I saw the DDoS hit the table and immediately I choked. I just gulped my saliva because, oh gosh, this is not what I want to see. DDoS means that it basically blanks my Fairchild 3. I can't res it. And they're going to surely trash the Marcus Batty and the Marilyn in the remote for free. Fortunately for me, instead of running the remote regularly, they play a dirty laundry. This brings them down to 0 credits, which means they don't even have the 1 credit required to trash my Marcus Batty. So I happily take this. I mean, they do get the dirty laundry off, but we take this. My opponent's not gaining anything apart from information about what's in server 1. Don't forget, DDoS costs 3 credits and Dirty Laundry returns them the 3 credits. So they're not making any money out of these 2 clicks. They're just getting remote information here. You'll notice that I still install with MT here, even though I can't rest the Fairchild 3 due to DDoS's effect. It's a free install. Why wouldn't I take it? I want... At this point, MT's ability is not so much for forcing the runner into a face plant, it's more for gaining tempo. It's a free click. I take a free click any day if you give me one. So my opponent gave me a free click to install the Fairchild 3. They see what's in the remote. I suspected they would actually rerun the remote to trash the Betty, but instead they go for R&D pressure, knowing that I've just expended my ID ability. I mean, the Maker's Eye was free either way because I wouldn't be able to res any ice I put on R&D. So yeah, fine. I'll concede the 3 cards on top of R&D. Oh, right. The snare hit Fem, and Black Orchestra. So much for my nefarious snare plans. That was a terrible snare. If anything, that helped my opponent because it put that Black Orchestra in the bin where they want it. And it also put their Fems in the bin exactly where they want it. You reckon my opponent is running Retrieval Run to cheat the Fems into play. They're not going to install it from hand for 9 credits. No way. So that snare actually helped my opponent more than it hindered them. That was a huge loss for me. I lost 4 credits and ended up helping my opponent in the process. Good news, no agendas on top, so we good for now. Well, there might be agendas, there might be an Obo Kata on top, which they couldn't steal, so whatever the case is, we are good for now. The nice thing about the snare is that it leaves me with exactly 2 credits to res the Marilyn, so we are still in good shape. And this is why I put the Marcus Betty in server 1. You see now they're hammering my HQ. If the Betty was in hand, it would be vulnerable here, but in the remote, it's arguably safer. I'm going to res the Marilyn here and take 3 credits because I'm poor. Passing the turn over to them, they are forced to spend 1 whole turn drawing up cards because of the snare. I guess that's a consolation prize. They spent, forcing them 2 or 3 clicks to draw cards. Not the worst deal in the world. And now, as we are starting to make money, we can now threaten more dangerous ice resorts. We definitely need to start defending our servers, so I'm going to totally ignore defending my servers and put another defensive upgrade in server 1. Again, the rationale is because I don't have to worry about employee strike this game. They've already revealed a levy AR off their max mill, so I can brazenly leave my centrals open. I'm not worried about HQ accesses. They can steal the Obo Carter if they so please. I'm not going to score it anytime soon. And if they run R&D, they are going to face check into a Komainu, which is a win for me. Right. So passing the turn over to them, they are pretty poor and they are tagged, so they must have forgotten about the snare tag or something, because as you see here, they're gonna spend the last click after playing the Sure Gamble to install a daily cast. I think, yes, there it goes. So no brainer here. We are definitely gonna trash the cast. This was a bit of a misstep from my opponent. I think they forgot about the snare tag. Turns out snare is just more than 3 net damage. The big question is, what else do I do on my turn? I'm going to Mirage HQ here because I'm drawing far too many agendas for my liking. Now, one thing with a forward tempo deck like Mti Wekundu is, this particular Spiky Jinteki, is that you never ever score Obo Carters unless they win you the game. Obo Carters are a really bad agenda to score, right? It might give you a false sense of security. Hey, this is a free 3-pointer. I can just score it because 9 out of 10 times, my opponent will never be able to contest the 4 net damage on Obo Carter. And you'll usually be right, but that doesn't mean it's the correct move. You need to score agendas that compensate you for the clicks that you spend advancing and scoring the agenda. Because in a tempo deck, if you're scoring agendas that don't give you benefits, you are losing the game, right? You're losing the tempo war. This means that it's just going to get harder and harder to score future agendas, and we don't want that. So the Obo Carters are going to stay in circulation for the rest of the game. This is a bad thing. So we need the Mirage on HQ in case they attack HQ. We can, shuffle these Obo Carters back into the deck where they are, much safer. So Mirage on HQ here. Usually Mirage will be placed on R&D to defend against indexing, but since my opponent showed Maker's Eye instead of indexing, I guess Mirage is better on HQ here. As we see here, my opponent smartly realizes their mistake and obediently clears the tag as they take their liberated money. Now we are looking for an agenda to score. We find one, we jam it in the remote, we attempt to score it. Is it safe to score now? Tough question. My opponent has milled a lot of breakers into the bin by now. I should expect a stim hack coming my way. I don't think this is a very safe turn to install advance just yet. All I have protecting my remote is a Fairchild 3 into a Komainu or a Kakugo. That's not enough to defend the Nisei. All they need to do is to stim hack in the remote and it's all theirs. So instead, I'm going to set up my economy. The thing is, if I install advance right there and proceed to spend all my credits scoring it, even if I score it, right? So 4 credits to advance and score the Nisei, 6 credits to rest the Fairchild 3 on server 1, and maybe 1 credit to either play the Sai game on Batty or to rest the Ben Musashi. I'll be poor. I'll be dead broke, and that means I can't defend the HQ Obokatas, I can't defend R&D, and that won't do. So besides putting the Nisei in a safer place in server 1, my last turn served to position me very well, because with the Maryland campaign ticking down in server 2, I can score the Nisei while not, giving a stealing window for my opponent by going down to 0 credits. Speaking of 0 credits, our opponent dirty laundries into archives here. Ooh, man, this is... They're not gonna like what they're about to see. With exactly 4 credits in their credit pool, that's enough to install a paperclip, but not enough to break Kakugo. You need 1 credit to break Kakugo. For a total of 5 credits, my opponent is 1 credit short. So the question here is, am I willing to spend 4 credits to deny my opponent 5 dirty laundry credits? The answer is, heck yeah! We are so gonna install the Kakugo here and make my opponent very sad. This is a very huge deal. Completely fizzling the dirty laundry and getting a free piece of ice on archives. Now granted, Kakugo's not in an ideal position. I'd rather it on server 1 than archives, which my opponent isn't probably going to run very often. But, fizzling a dirty laundry is a huge deal and is the reason why MT is such a powerful identity. It blanks dirty laundries and armor coolers until they have the means to break your ice. And a lot of decks are running these powerful cards. So it turns out that the Maryland was absolutely the correct play here, because I immediately drew into an IPO that I could play this turn. So the play is easily credit IPO. This sets me up very, very well for scoring the Nisei the turn after that. Now, if I could, I would have advanced the Nisei in addition to playing the IPO, but I didn't have the money to do so. I was just 1 credit short of advancing the Nisei and then being at 8 credits to play the IPO. But now we can do the Nisei thing. The other option here was to wait until a Jeeves showed up. That way I can score the Nisei from an unadvanced state where my opponent wouldn't expect it. I chose not to do that because, firstly, who knows when the next Jeeves will turn up, but more importantly, with 2 defensive upgrades in server 1, I'm feeling pretty good about the remote. To protect against DDoS, which my opponent has showed, I'm going to put a Thimble Rig on server 1 as the outermost ice, so definitely forcing them to encounter the Fairchild 3 one way or another. I know they have David out, but if I win the Marcus Batty side game, they won't have the resources to break Fairchild 3 twice. And yeah, so that was my intention. At the very least, tax out the David. So, yep. They played the same old thing, and I saw the Hacktivist in their bin. The Hacktivist was milled by Max earlier, so as soon as they did that, I res Marcus Batty for free. I did not want Hacktivist to hit my Marcus Batty. So they run R&D here. I'm looking at the hand. They have 6 cards in hand. This seems like a prime opportunity to fire Komainu. I know they have MK Ultra in the bin, but it will cost them all 11 credits to break all subroutines of Komainu with MK Ultra. So I'm saying, heck yeah, let's do it. It's a very risky maneuver because this compromises my ability to score in the remote, except that it doesn't really, because if they want to contest my remote after this, they have to deal with this Komainu first, and that's a very nasty face check. Right, so they break all subroutines with MK Ultra, literally going down to 0 credits just to see 1 card off the top of R&D, and what do you know? It is the Nisei Mark II. Great, single accesses winning again. That was a very painful loss. I did not want to lose a Nisei off the top of my deck there, but very well played to my opponent. Their aggression being rewarded right there. Single accesses are very important. People don't do that enough against MT, and my opponent, making a very good play in running R&D right there. And this also leaves me in a weaker position, so now they can actually contest my remote with a stim hack into server 1. I'm looking at my server, I'm doing the maths, and I realize that they're going to get through the server no matter what, and my Ben Musashi cannot protect the Nisei. My only line of defense here is Marcus Batty. I need to win the Marcus Batty side game on an end run ice. So either Thimble Rig or Fairchild 3 would do here. I'm going to choose Thimble Rig. Now I'm going to do something really unconventional. Typically, you would only fire the Batty at the very last moment when the runner has broken all your ice. This is to tax as many of their credits as possible. In this case, there is no taxation available because my opponent's using free credits from Stim Hack. So because of that, What I want to do instead is to minimize the number of credits that they can use from Stim Hack. I'm going to fire the Marcus Batty before they even get to encounter the Thimble Rig. This means that Marcus Batty fires before they get a window to install their Black Orchestra. If I win the side game here, I'm going to cheekily bid 0 here. I will end the run before they encounter the Black Orchestra, the Thimble Rig, meaning that they can't use Stim Hack money to install Black Orchestra, setting them back 3 credits, and that every credit counts in a tempo deck. So this was the rationale behind my play, and I think I made the right play here. It conserves me money because I'm spending only 2 credits to rest the Thimble Rig, and my opponent doesn't get their Black Orchestra up. They will take this their Black Orchestra back after this. My other option would have been to res the Fairchild 3, let them use their David counters. This way I'll be able to tax their David counters, making it harder for them to contest the remote in subsequent runs. I chose not to do that because they could easily trash the David to Fairchild 3 and then recur it later on. There's not much point in taxing David counters in my opinion. So, needless to say, winning the Batty side game was a huge deal. I was able to score a Nisei Mark II that they would have stolen otherwise had I lost the side game. Right, so now we are in a pretty good position. Even though the score is tied up, I do have a Nisei counter to my name. The next step here is to get more money via IPO and then score the next non-Obo Carter agenda that I draw. With my opponent at 0 credits, I have, a couple of turns to do this before they get set up and are able to threaten my remote once again. At this time, nothing much is going on during the game. I'm clicking to draw to find my next agenda, as my opponent is clicking to take credits so they can contest my next agenda. I'll temporarily pause commentary until the next important event in the game. A while later, my butler shows up. "How may I help you?" the butler asks. "Well, I'd like you to sit in the corner right over there, server 4. And so the butler went to sit in server 4. Right, we pass the turn over to our opponent, who has their hacktivist now trashed because I counter-currented it with scarcity. So this is very important, because that means I can rest my Jeeves without potentially milling an Obo Carter in the bin. I was doing some calculations on whether they had a second copy of Hacktivist. I risked it. Thankfully, it seems like the Hacktivist was milled from the stack. They had 2 copies in the bin. The last one was milled off the last max mill. So they can't Hacktivist me here. They could same old thing into Hacktivist, but that means giving up the levy, which I don't think they're willing to do. So I let the G's remain there unrest as they run into my HQ. I think the purpose of my opponent running HQ is to force me to res and ice, which, well, happened. And this means they can actually install Black Orchestra from the bin before they levy. This was a very smart move by my opponent. Most people would say more levy right here. But levying here means that the Black Orchestra and Paperclip go back into the stack where they have to find again, my opponent has to slowly search through the deck for again. By doing this, they can threaten to run my remote with the decoder out even after the levy. So that was very smart. The downside to this is that they actually went to let my Miraju fire twice. So I was able to shuffle both copies of Obo Carter back into R&D. And they missed my snare. They also missed the viral weaponization I drew on my second Miraju. So this is the perfect time to score the viral weaponization. And the best part is it can go undetected, as I put it into my remote unadvanced. Now, I could have res the Jeeves here and click for 3 credits and then install viral weaponization for an extra credit gain. Instead, I kept Jeeves undercover. My butler is working in stealth mode. Unbeknownst to my opponent, I sacrificed the 1 extra credit I would have gotten from the Jeeves extra click in order to keep Jeeves a secret. And that is, a very much intended play. By doing so, my opponent will not see a 4-2 agenda score coming. They will be lulled into a false sense of security, thinking that they can levy here safely, when in actual fact, they are going to get hit by a viral weaponization. So watch as they levy here, and I'm gonna get a very sweet viral weaponization off. Except that they're not really levying. I remarked how it was a nice combo for them to levy right after using the patchwork here. So the combo is, you same old levy, but before you activate the levy, you use patchwork to reduce levy's play costs by 2. The cost is you need to trash a card from your hand, but that doesn't matter because you're putting all the cards in your hand back into the stack anyway. So that's a very nice way. Essentially, you're playing levy for 2 credits less at no extra cost. Usually, milling a card from your hand is a cost, but it doesn't matter when you're playing levy anyway. The trouble is, my opponent isn't actually levying here. It's very interesting. You would think that they levy here, but no. My opponent has other plans today. Somehow, one of the 3 cards left in their hand seems to be really important, and they're not about to levy just yet. They're gonna play Retrieval Run, so that's what they were up to all this while. They wanted to get the Fem in play before they levied, because makes sense, right? The Fems are in the bin, they have a Retrieval Run in the hand, they might never get a chance to install a Fem again, and Fem is bloody good against my deck. It can nullify my Fetch Out 3, completely nullify my Komainu. Why wouldn't you Retrieval Run? The best part is, the net damage from the Kakugo is inconsequential because they're gonna levy anyway. So, of course they break the Kakugo, they take the net damage which is irrelevant. Now, I can fire Mti's ability to force them to lose more money. I have 3 options in my hand and none of them are very good. The Cortex Lock will force 1 net damage on my opponent, but they can tank the net damage because they have exactly 1 card in hand. The Gatekeeper is not very good, because they have David counters to break the 6 strength Gatekeeper. They can't break Thimble Rig with David, however, but they have a Black Orchestra to break Thimble Rig, and with exactly 3 credits, they can do just that. So I cannot stop my opponent from a successful Retrieval Run, unless I use the Nisei counter. And that's a very difficult decision point. Would you expand your Nisei counter here? Pause the video and think about it. Right. Regardless of whether we are expanding the Nisei counter or not, we definitely want to tax our opponent here. Knowing that they're going to levy next, we want to tax them on money rather than David counters. So with that in mind, we are going to install Thimble Rig, as that is the only ice that can siphon money from our opponent guaranteed. It's going to cost them all 3 of their credits, meaning that next turn they'll be forced to credit, and then wait for the levy. That levy is going to be severely delayed. And the Thimble Rig isn't expensive to res. So we force them to spend all their money here just to get the red run off. They are now down to 0 credits. They cannot contest our remote server. They cannot contest any of our centrals. They have no money. I think this is a good time to use the Nisei counter. So I used it. I think it was a pretty obvious decision here, because this basically puts them in a very deep hole that they have to spend 2 entire turns crawling out of. So if you are able to achieve such tempo hit to your opponent, losing the Nisei token is worth it. Even though if it means that in the future it is harder to defend our remote. We are hoping to win off the tempo game here, not off the drag our opponent through the remote 5 times victory strategy. So, yep. We dug a very deep hole for our opponent and dumped them in there. Now it's time to score the viral weaponization. Except that it isn't really time to score the viral weaponization, is it? Would you really score a viral weaponization here when your opponent only has 1 card in hand to take net damage off? I didn't think so, no. We want to score the viral weaponization after the levy. So I was actually quite annoyed that they didn't levy last turn. If they had levied, it would have been a good time to just wipe their hand. Instead, we are forced to incubate the viral weaponization for another whole turn. I want maximum mileage out of my agendas, and I know they can't get into my server here. Fetch Out 3 is too difficult to get through, but more importantly, with the Ben Musashi in server 1, they cannot steal the viral weaponization. They only have 1 hit point. They need to take 2 net damage to steal the viral. So they levy here, and this is the one window, the one chance they get to turn the game around. If and only if they stim hack into server 1 right here, right now, they get the agenda and can turn the game in their favor. So that's a pretty it's pretty hard to read that. So my opponent did not end up going for the stim hack, but I was very worried for my life right here. I was clenching my teeth, very, very afraid of the stim hack, but it didn't come. Either they didn't draw it, or chose not to make the play. So we definitely are gonna get a huge viral weaponization off here. This is gonna be amazing. It's gonna be epic. The question is, can we rush our way to victory before our opponent sets up with the second run through the deck? Let's see. I'm thinking about Timber Rig triggers here. I put the Kokugo on the remote because it becomes quite obvious that after scoring this viral, my score plan is with the Obo Carter in my hand, and any amount of net damage I can pile on my opponent at this point is going to be important. So, it's time to see what our viral weaponization has hit. We are going to click for 3 credits of Jeeves and score the bloody viral. Oh man, this is one of the best feelings ever. Scoring viral is always a very exciting thing to do. That is a slam dunk, everyone. Oh my gosh, 4 money cards just went in the bin just like that. I've never seen a viral weaponization so crazy good before. Wow. And that's tempo for you. They spent their entire next turn drawing up as I'm ready to close out the game. To make the most efficient use of my actions, I'm going to get my Jeeves click by installing 3 different cards. One of which is the Rashida, which, if my opponent doesn't check, if they go for my Obo Carter instead, and aren't able to steal it, but I am too poor to score it, if I rest the Fairchild 3 on server 1, the Rashida will give me the 3 credits needed to score out the agenda. So my opponent does check the Rashida, but curiously, can't trash it. They have no money at all. So what do they do next? Well, they swing over to server 5. What can I say? That was certainly going out with a bang. Now don't get me wrong, my opponent played very well this game. They played a strong deck and they knew all the intricacies of it, such as using patchwork on the levy, such as getting as many of their breakers out as possible before the levy, and most importantly actually asserting just the right amount of pressure. As I keep reiterating every time I play Mti with Kundu, runners just don't run enough against Mti. And my opponent ran a lot. That's why they were able to get the Nisei, and they would have gotten more agendas from my hand had I not found a Miraju on HQ. So my opponent played very well. It's just that they couldn't take into account and factor in all these random curveballs I was throwing at them, because this isn't your typical Mti Glacier list. This has snares and viral weaponizations. Who expects this? Nobody does. And this is why I think a lot of people enjoy the Jinteki faction. Even if they lose games, as long as they get to throw their curveballs at the runner, that's all that they need to do to feel a sense of satisfaction, even if it means losing the game. Yeah? And that's what Netrunner's about, having fun. So yeah, we had a lot of fun this game, even though the snare wasn't really the MVP. I could have won by obviously scoring the Obo Carter next turn. But hey, we take these wins, we take him. So the best part about what I mentioned about Fun Runner as Spiky in Jinteki is that you don't have to copy my list card for card. That is the best part. As I mentioned, there are so many curveballs in the current Jinteki card pool that you can utilize to your advantage. You can start swapping out some of the slots in my deck for other cards, and the list is really endless. I think a lot of you will be tempted to, in the comment section, ask why don't you play card X or card Y, probably one of the cards that you see on the screen right now, and the answer is, why not? You can. Obviously, I'm not going to fit all these cards in the same deck because I'm not going to play an 80 card Mti deck, no way, but you can certainly try it out for yourself and see how effective these cards are. The best part is, no one's expecting them because it's yet another curveball, and that's where the fun of the game is. Throwing curveballs at your opponent and watching them react, squirm, and trying to navigate their way through this net damage horror nonsense. Well, that was a very fun game, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching, and have a fun time with Spiky Jinteki.